Keely Henninger, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Dylan. I feel like I'm a reoccurring guest now.
Yes. Well, I mean, you were on after you won the Gorge Waterfalls 50K last year, but it's been probably close to 2 years or more since we had a more formal long form discussion. So welcome back to the podcast. And today we're going to do that again. We'll do some announcing. We have got some fun stuff that we're rolling out here at Freetrail that you have been spearheading behind the scenes and that you are going to be leading going forward. But also we're going to talk a lot about you and your career. But maybe we should start with the sort of announcement that we're going to make. Does that sound good with you?
It sounds great.
Okay. So this new sort of extension of the Freetrail business is called Freetrail Experts. Can you just maybe start by providing a general description of what it is to the audience before we dive into some of the details?
Totally. Yeah. So the Freetrail Experts is going to be a group of really skilled practitioners and coaches who have vast experience working with both trail and ultra runners in the fields of performance coaching, strength training, injury prevention, nutrition, and mental well-being. And we kind of put this together because the Freetrail family is filled with athletes of all abilities and a lot of different goals. So we wanted to bring a group of experts with a lot of diverse backgrounds to help conquer all of these unique training goals and bring in a new, unique perspective of a community that not only works on, enhancing the performance of the athlete from a conditioning perspective, but also from a nutrition perspective and a mental health perspective, and makes this community that's very cohesive and allows for our athletes to actually really optimize their potential in all avenues of trail running. Because, you and I know that it's not just about the running sometimes. There's a lot of other avenues that go into becoming the best version of yourself on the trail and off the trail. And so I'm really excited to bring together this group of experts to really bring that to the community.
Yeah. And I think just to provide some of the deeper context, I think it was a year and a half ago or so that we surveyed the Freetrail community to gauge interest in if we launched sort of a coaching marketplace or a coaching service, if our community would be interested in it. And the overwhelming consensus was yes, they would be interested as long as we recruited a very high quality group of experts and practitioners who we've personally vetted and trusted. And we've done so. It's taken a little while, but we've landed on an amazing cohort of founding experts for this launch. Do you maybe just want to take through those individuals very briefly, just to provide their names and what their specialty is?
Totally. Yeah. So from a performance coaching lens, we're bringing on 3 other ladies. MK Sullivan, who, if people don't know her, she's an up and coming amazing athlete. She recently won Way Too Cool and the Marathon de Mont Blanc. She was top 10 this year. But she also, for the past 3 years until recently, coached at Division I college for University of Nevada. And she also has a lot of certifications in the realm of track and field running and just endurance coaching in general. And is just a wealth of knowledge in terms of coaching. We're also bringing on Hannah Allgood, who's no stranger to the pod or to the Freetrail fam. And for those of you who don't know Hannah, she won Gorge Waterfalls 100K last year and San Juan Solstice. So she's a phenomenal trail runner, again, new to the scene, but just came and grabbed it by the horns. But she is a doctor of physical therapy who specializes in returning to run and running strength training. That's like really good to optimize performance on and off the trails. And she also is in the pursuit of a running certification as well and has dabbled a lot in coaching as well. So we're really excited to bring her on as a coach and strength training coach. And then last but not least, again, no stranger to the Freetrail fam is Danielle Snyder. She'll be coming on as both a running performance coach and a mental health coach. And she has so many accolades to her name in the realm of crazy endurance things. She held the PCT Oregon FKT for a while. She's done so many crazy things. And she also is just very well versed in the realm of mental well-being and how to optimize your mental health for endurance athletics. And she's worked with so many professional Olympic caliber athletes. So it's really cool to have her on board as well. And then
so those are our run coaches. Two of them sort of also span different sort of specialties in mental performance in Danielle's case, and also in Hannah's case being sort of an injury prevention / strength training.
Exactly.
coach.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll kind of be overseeing all of them. So we're going to have like weekly, coaching or monthly to weekly coaching calls, kind of discussing the latest trends in coaching, and just discussing training in general. Because there's always going to be those athletes that are a little bit of a unique case, and you're going to want to run your ideas around all the other coaches. And hopefully all my experience with coaching and performance algorithm development and all my experimental knowledge will help drive some of those discussions as well. But some of the things that I don't know about are nutrition. And we brought on 2 really stellar dietitians and 1 nutritionist to really tackle this for the family as well. So we're bringing on Dr. Kelly Pritchett, who is a PhD professor and director of kinesiology and nutrition at Central Washington University. And I've actually been doing research with her for the past year, looking into the fueling practices of trail and ultra runners and how it relates to things like low energy availability and eating disorders and all of that. And we really hope to take that knowledge in order to, inform some of the dietary practices of trail and ultra runners so they actually start to reach their potential. So needless to say, she has a ton of experience. She has a lot of publications in this realm and is really, really well-versed on, nutritional interventions for the endurance athlete. And then we're also bringing on Wilfredo Benitez, who is also a friend of Dylan and a friend of the pod and a local to Portland, who has a different lens to nutrition. So again, another perspective, which is really unique. He comes from a holistic medicine background where he got his master's in nutrition from a Portland holistic medicine school. And so he really likes to view the athlete as a whole and try to figure out lifestyle changes and nutritional changes that can really optimize them as both a human and as an athlete. And so I love his philosophy here, and I think he'll be a great addition to the team as well.
Last but not least, Mr. Matt Walsh.
And then last but not least, we have Matt Walsh, who's again, no stranger to the pod, but his list of accolades speak for themselves, but he's been a physical therapist for over 30 years now, has worked with, countless professional running teams, and most recently has taken an interest into trail running as of like 3 years ago, helping you with your ankle, helping me with my ankles. Now leads our local trail running group for the past 1.5 years, doing a lot of strength training with us and rehabilitation stuff with us. And is just a wealth of knowledge. And he'll be on board to, talk you through any sort of niggles you might have, just kind of as an injury consultation. But also he'll be on to provide a trail running specific strength training program that can go alongside your run program or your nutrition program, so that you can become that well-rounded athlete and really, get away from being injured on the trail and be your strongest running self.
So again, just to provide the macro context of this, as Keely and I were talking about the individuals who we wanted to enlist in this founding group of Freetrail Experts, we knew we wanted to have traditional one-on-one run coaching, but we also wanted to have different specialists with different areas of expertise, like Kelly Pritchett, like Wilfredo, like Matt Walsh. And so I think with the group that we've assembled, we have people who can help you not only with becoming a better, faster, stronger trail runner, but to also help you with your nutrition and your strength training as well. Keely, maybe quickly before we move off this, just tell people where they can learn a little bit more about the Freetrail Experts.
Yeah, so you can go to freetrail.com and you can click on the experts tab, and then you'll see not only all of the experts listed there where you can click into their unique profiles, but you can also then tap into the different programs we'll have available for you all, and get to know them all a little better. They've all recorded a personalized video for you to get to know them a little bit better too. And all you have to do is then submit a request and submit basically some basic information about yourself. And then we'll kind of filter through it and get you on the phone with one of our lovely coaches.
Amazing. Well, Keely, thank you for all the work that you've done to bring this to life, and appreciate you giving a quick introduction to the Freetrail podcast audience. And now we can start talking more about you. I figured a good place to start would be to just do a little bit of professional reflection. I think it's been about a year since you left your job at Nike and went all in on your life as a professional athlete. Of course, you do a lot of work with Freetrail, with Trail Society, and as I understand it, you're also doing a lot of academic work. But maybe first, before we get into some of the stuff that you're working on now, is there anything that you've learned from taking this leap of faith about a year ago?
Yeah, I think I've learned, there's like 2 big buckets of learning. One is like that all of the, flexibility that comes with leaving a 9 to 5, that's kind of restraining of your time, is that all the extra time you do have or can make time for recovery does help. Like I have seen huge improvements in my own fitness over the past year. And so I think seeing that is really, really cool. But on the flip side of that coin is that even if you don't have a 9 to 5, you can say yes to like way too many things and basically still have a 9 to 5. It's just the hours are not as strict. And so you're just working just as much, just kind of scattered throughout the day. And so, while you're still able to maybe make a little more time for running, it's not necessarily as much of a full-time running as you might think. And so I think I tell people full-time running, but then I have to chuckle to myself because when I add up everything else I do, I'm like, is it full-time running? I don't know.
Yeah. But has there been anything that's been different or harder than you expected, or has your mindset or attitude towards running changed without the safety net of the 9 to 5?
For sure. Yeah. I think going all in on something is really scary. And I think a lot of us don't go all in on something because we're afraid that, you invest your entire being into something and it doesn't go right, that could be catastrophic. And, I had a little glimpse of that this summer because I went all in for Western States and I trained like crazy and I felt the fittest I've ever felt going into a race ever. And I felt the calmest as well. But something happened during the race that made me not be able to finish and had to sit out of running this thing that was now full time for 2 months. That just so happened to be even time when I wasn't in school because it was summer term. And so, you're sitting with your thoughts for 2 months in a place that you normally get to be outside and experience with all your friends. You're unable to do anything. And it was a reminder that even though I am going all in running, I can't let that be my sole identity. And so, when you're injured and you're not able to run, but you have a 9 to 5, you can kind of invest yourself in the 9 to 5. You have the community there. You have other things to distract you. When you're injured and you don't have that, it's a really big test because you start to just overthink everything and you kind of question your identity and question the confidence in yourself. So It was a big journey.
We'll talk more about that injury and the process of getting through it. But you just said that it's scary to go all in on something. Can you tell us a little bit about the fears maybe that you confronted during this process of going all in?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've had this fear my entire life. I think going all in on something is really scary because there's this small percentage that you could fail and then you feel like a failure because it didn't go right. But my counter to that for a long time is what I was battling was that, okay, I'm not going all in, but I'm also only going 80% in. And so you're never actually reaching your potential. So, in a different frame of mind, is that failing because you're unwilling to go all the way in? And so I kind of reframed it that way as like, you know what, if I do want to go all in, I'm going to just do it. I'm going to give myself this like finite amount of time and I'm going to go all in and be okay with the outcome because maybe I find out that going all in didn't really change anything for me. My performance had plateaued with a 9 to 5 because I need that balance or that's where my fitness lies. But at least I would know. And it wouldn't be like, oh, you know what? I feel like I could win those races, but I just never gave myself the time because I was too stubborn and I was working these other jobs that I was also giving 90% to. And so with this new reframing, I was kind of like, okay, I'm able to go all in. It is scary because I could fail, but at least then I know. And then it's like the same with all my future endeavors as well. Like finally deciding to go back to medical school, something that's very daunting to me and reminds me of my undergrad and all those crazy stress. It's now really exciting because I'm like, okay, I can go all in. And like, if I fail, I fail. But if not, like I'm going all in. And that's really, really exciting as well.
Now, skipping ahead to this medical school discussion and the fact that you're studying for the MCAT, though, is that a reflection of you maybe keeping one foot in the realm of safety? I don't know if you've ever contemplated this or because I don't know, I feel that I totally hear you on like the importance of going all in, but also like obviously you're the type of person who is a high achieving individual who's not just going to be training twice a day and posting on Instagram and having that be your life. But have you meditated on that at all about like what you gave up with your career at Nike
Mm-hmm.
and how you're allocating that time and energy now. Like, you feel like you're more aligned with the person that you want to be in, with the career that you want to have, or are you still sort of keeping one foot in the realm of safety?
Oh, I love that question. It's very unsettling, but I would say, old Keely, so like rewind 7 years ago, probably was still holding on to a safety net. I think I've just got to a point where, again, if I didn't say yes to everything and I just was studying for the MCAT and running, that feels really achievable. I like to overachieve. So I've put a lot more on my plate, but I'd say one of the biggest factors of me leaving my job, there were two huge factors. One, running. I knew I wanted to pursue running full time. And two, the acknowledgement that corporate science and being a corporate researcher was not what I wanted to do. And that my dreams of going to medical school from when I was like 14 or 15 were still there. And they were getting stronger as I got further and further into my research career. And acknowledging that, I could find a contract that allowed me to run full time, but also pursue my bigger dream of going back to medical school without having to work full time, study for the MCAT, run. Like that's not work. It's literally not possible.
So it's almost like you're going all in on two separate things.
A little bit,
your dreams of being a pro athlete and opening up the time and energy to really achieve potential there, but also the long-term dream of Keely as a young girl of going to medical school.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think I knew that I could have this 3-year span of only having to study and apply. And to me, that felt like enough, or I guess like not enough stuff to make me not be able to run to my potential.
Yeah.
But it was like enough to be able to invest, a decent amount of time to be able to put together a really good application, but also still have a lot of really good time to put into training. Because, even though I do say yes to a lot of things, I still have a lot more free time than I used to.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I asked. It was meant to be sort of like a devil's advocate thing.
Yeah, I bet. It was a good question.
That's interesting. There was a video that our mutual friend, Ryan Thrower, made before Western States that just was a sort of personal piece about you, just a couple of minutes. But in it, your partner, JT Livingston, said something to the effect of Keely's just a high drive individual. And we're sort of glancing on this subject now. Is that something that's always been in your nature? It's something that I've observed too. Have you always had this high achieving streak to you?
If you ask my therapist, she would say yes. But you asked me, I'd also say yes. I mean, for sure, it was born into me at a very small age. My parents held me to the highest standards you could hold a child to. And while, I don't know if that was necessarily the best thing in all those regards or how I internalized it was the best thing, I do think it like kept me on my high driving track. And I'm always thinking about like, what else I can do, which have tried to learn to table a little bit and be able to have a lot more time to become, to perfect something like running or to perfect something like the MCAT and not be, having 40% of my whole body into 10 different things and being like, oh, I can do all of these things. It's just, you're not going to do them as well as you want to. But yeah, I've always been very high driving.
Have you struggled with the perfectionist tendencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want a really good recent example, that's a little bit embarrassing. I went into my biochemistry final and I think I needed like a 70 to get an A in the class. And I got a 100. And if I wouldn't have got a 100, I would have been really mad.
Well, maybe this is a perfect opportunity to talk more about your academic life. You said in a text exchange the other day that you're basically studying 5 hours a day. So maybe be a little bit more specific about what your long-term goals are with this education.
Yeah. So for the last year, I took one class a semester. So super easy course load, just getting ready for the MCAT. And now I'm taking the MCAT in the middle of March. So basically just cut out a 9-week, 10-week almost training program, right? For studying for the MCAT. And so that requires like 4-ish days a week, maybe 5, getting closer to the test of between 5 and 8 hours of studying. Again, starting with 5 as I'm further away and kind of building up a little bit as I get closer. Strategically building up the most post Black Canyons so that right now I'm doing a reasonable amount. And then post Black Canyons, hopefully after I get a golden ticket, I can just study for a month, recover, take the MCAT, and then hit the ground running, ready for Western States. Because after the MCAT, basically, if all goes well, I'll apply in June for medical school. And then basically we'll just have to do interviews once that application goes through. But then won't have school for over a year. So we'll have the rest of that whole year free.
Is this something that like really lights you up? Because it feels like it is. I'd love to hear you talk about just like the joy of learning, if that's something you want to talk
yeah,
about.
Sure. I mean, I love learning, but I think it's also, I love learning in my own environment. And once I like turned 30, because I think when you're in undergrad, you maybe grew up being really smart and liking learning, but then you go into undergrad and you're told all these mixed messages of like, if you want to go to med school, you got to do this and do this research and take this job and take this many credits. And I think you slowly lose your joy of learning because it's like, it's a mode of survival. You're like, I can't actually learn all this stuff. I need to memorize and then, white knuckle my way through final exams so that I get these grades that then can get me to medical school. And I think you forget the joy. Taking classes now with this balance and, my ability to go to sleep at a normal time and to not go out partying with my friends, you can learn so deeply. And it's really fun to go back on that learning journey and to actually, build the confidence in your ability to learn and also just to really, really enjoy it and to understand it in a way that you never knew was possible because you were just kind of, staying afloat when you could.
Yeah, I so identify with this, and I was never an academic person. I never found joy in learning in a school context, but the last like 2 years, I've learned more than the entirety of my academic life, combined just by sort of like reading and learning about what it takes to sort of like build a company from scratch. And now I just like feel so much joy and satisfaction just in the process of like learning how other people have done it. And so that's sort of what the origination of that question was. Do you understand at this point, or do you have an idea of how you might apply this education? Like in the eventuality that you get whatever medical degree that you're targeting, do you know how you want to, do you know what you want to be when you grow up?
I do. Well, at least I have an idea of what I want to do. But when I was a scientist for Nike, I got the opportunity to study female hormones in athletes, specifically runners, for the last 2 years of my career there and look at things like injury risk and longitudinal running performance. And I also just had a lot of in-depth conversations with women about their hormones and about their menstrual cycle and about menopause and all of these things. And I've just realized that the field is so new. There's a lot of things that aren't known in it. And that, the female sex hormones have a big impact in a lot of different bodily processes. And I think there's a lot of unknowns of how we can implement and opportunize these hormones so that women's can live a better life and that we can look at all of the disease elements and all of these things. And so, obviously it's going to be a big learning curve and lots of things I need to learn along the way, but I would love to go into women's health and really look into endocrinology and how hormones impact a lot of things. And also have a lens into not only athletes, because obviously I would love to work with athletes, but also just the general female population and see how they kind of overlap and see how they're different. So yeah, I really look up to Dr. Emily Krause and the team at Stanford who are doing a lot in women's health, as well as the women's health initiative at Harvard. There's a lot of really good, solid research physician collaborations going on right now to really better understand women. And so that's kind of the realm I want to go into.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for entertaining me on that. And I think for our audience, you got to catch the articles that Freetrail or that Keely writes for freetrail.com because they're always, in most cases, or at least the most recent ones, I guess, are not specific to women's health, but at least are peripheral to it and are always deeply researched and referenced with scientific literature. So
I try to keep them a little bit funny though.
Well, I was going to say, thank you for making those understandable to a caveman like me. So let's talk more about your running.
Yeah.
Let's rewind back to Western States 2022. Yep. Was a specific moment during race day where Corinne and I nearly fell out of our seats during the broadcast. And that's when you and Ruth and Emily Hawgood all came into the Devil's Thumb aid station together about halfway into the race. And unfortunately, something bad happened after that. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But I'm sure you've had a lot of time to reflect on the positives that you drew from that experience at Western States, your second running. What were some of those? Like, what were some of the positive takeaways of your performance that day?
Yeah, great question. It's really easy to forget about the positives when something like that happens. But I would say the biggest positive that I had looking back initially is my now confidence in my ability to run that race, how I know I can, because I've never ran as close to plan as I did that day, where I was running paces true to myself. I would stop and do everything I needed to with my crew. I wasn't fighting my crew. I wasn't forgetting to eat. I wasn't forgetting to hydrate. I wasn't, running paces that were not something I could handle. And so I'd say like the biggest thing was just understanding that I could actually execute at least to 55 miles, a race that I really wanted to execute. And to be honest, I've never really held my goals that strong for that long of a time before. I feel like I've always kind of like gone back and forth a lot during a race. And, the year before at Western States, totally kind of just the wheels fell off and I stopped, doing everything correctly and was kind of just like, I don't want to trust anybody, my crew, I don't know. So that would probably be number one. And then number two is trusting my crew. And that part is so important because again, at mile, 80, you're not to be trusted. What you say does not matter, but you need to trust your crew. And I think I had a little bit of an ego the year before of like, I've done this stuff before. 100 miles is not that much further. I'm going to know better. I don't need to eat. I'm fine, whatever. But actually your crew knows best at that point. They just want to see you succeed. And so you need to kind of swallow your pride and listen to them. And that's kind of how I found myself during the race of like, my crew is my alliance, it's my partner. They're going to really try to get me to go forward. So like whatever they say, I need to listen to. Yeah. So
you made a point of saying earlier in our conversation that going into Western States in 2022, it was not only the fittest you'd ever felt, but also the calmest you've ever felt. What do you think put you in that position?
The calm definitely came from just hours and hours of running. You put so much time into training and doing a lot of time on the course and doing a lot of really long runs by yourself and a lot of really long, hard runs as workouts that when I got to the race, the actual thought of racing was really calming.
Yeah.
Because that's what I knew. That's all I've been doing for 3 months. So like took up so much of my time that part felt really easy. So entering the race, like I wasn't really nervous at all. The parts that got me nervous was kind of the hype before the race, maybe the day or two prior, but like the actual race day. And during those days when I would think about the race itself, I felt really, really calm, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. So you were actually excited for the challenge rather than dreading it. And I think it was evident as somebody who watched every second of the race because you built that momentum and eventually caught the early leaders, Ruth Croft and Emily Hawgood, at a critical moment in the race. Can you take us into that moment? What was going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, the whole time that I kept gaining on those two stellar runners, all I could think about was like, okay, should I slow down? Like, do I want to leave right now? The answer is kind of no. But again, like my whole goal with the race was to run like really true to myself. And the speeds I was running to run close to them did not feel weird. And so, when I caught them on that climb, at that point, I'd come to terms with the fact that maybe I would start leading, but it was because I felt really, really good. And like, I wasn't having to exert myself to catch them. I just basically was like, okay, if I catch them and they leave the aid station before or after me, it is what it is. But I still didn't catch them and was like, oh my gosh, I need to hammer it out of this aid station to put them in the rearview mirror because it was still only like mile 40 something. And so, I got there at the aid station. I ended up leaving after them because I needed some water and to fill up some stuff. And, being calm allowed me to stay and do that. And if I had felt like a little bit out of touch with myself, catching the leaders would have probably resulted in me skipping that aid station. And, long term, that would have resulted me in a not a good scenario. So I think it was really cool to feel really excited that I caught them and really confident in myself at the same time, but also really, really calm to be okay with them leaving ahead of me and knowing that if I just kept doing what I was doing, I would catch them again.
Yeah. Again, Corinne and I, nearly lost our minds when we saw you come into the aid station because it wasn't clear how far behind them you were until the camera caught all three of you in the aid station at the same time. And to me, it felt like you were running a perfect race up until that basically halfway point at Devil's Thumb. It's about mile 47 for our listeners. But of course, it wasn't a perfect race after that, even though there are a lot of positive takeaways. Maybe just quickly remind the audience what happened after that.
Yeah. So, I twisted my ankle at mile 10. So up in that, the high altitude section with those rocks, not hard, but not easy, but it was like, a twist that didn't go away right away. But, as I'm running, I'm like, I think it'll be fine. It was just kind of a niggle. And you get kind of caught up in the race and you don't think about it all the time, but our ankles, not great ankles. So it was definitely not a great twist, but anyways, getting into 47, you start more downhill, into that next canyon, and maybe at mile like 52, getting really close to where you cross the bridge and go up and out towards, Michigan Bluff. Yeah. Basically probably like less than a mile from the bottom, I twisted the same one again, to the point where like it knocked me over. And at that point I was like, oh, that is a bad one. Like that is not okay. And, we twist our ankles a lot. I've broken my other ankle before. I know what bad ankle sprains are. And this one felt a lot different than a normal ankle sprain. Like it was pulsing, shearing pain, like through the medial part of my ankle, which like typically is not where you feel the pain. Yeah. And I was like, okay, it's fine. Like it's going to go away. So I basically tiptoe my way down because the downhill was the hardest. And then I'm able to sort of jog the flat at first and then hike my way up out of that canyon, which was just so demoralizing because that is my favorite canyon. It is my favorite one to run. Like it is such a good one to run most of the whole thing. And you get
you're having the good Western States when you're just hammering up that climb to Michigan Bluff. Yeah.
And so, getting passed by some people on that was not great for the ego, but it was also like, I couldn't do anything about it. So I couldn't get that mad at myself because I just couldn't run. Yeah. So I got out of there, saw Brian at the top. I'm like, yo, I popped my ankle bad. And he's just like, well, you're still going. So just keep going. And I'm like, I'll try. Yeah. But I think like, I kind of accepted that I didn't think I was going to finish basically coming out of that canyon, because in my mind, if I could barely walk without this searing pain, yeah, I didn't see it getting better because, at that point it had been 45 minutes to an hour since I had last when I sprained it. Yeah. And I sprained my ankles enough to know when they're a sprain or a twist versus something worse. And that one was just getting worse and not getting better. So I got to the aid station, started crying, and then was like, okay, well, I'll see about getting it taped, see if that helps at all. Knowing like that it wasn't, but I just needed to do it. They taped it. They were both of the medical professionals there were so lovely, trying to get me to go. They were like, you're going to be able to finish. We don't think there's anything that's that wrong. Again, like they didn't do any images or anything like that. They're just trying to get the runners to get to their finish line, because that's most people's goal. Yeah. But ultimately like tried to run on it a couple times. Each time I'd get like 20 steps away and just like have to stop. Yeah. And ended up pulling the plug on the race, with a lot more tears than I've probably ever cried in my life. I'm not a big crier.
Can you talk about that pain? Because I've also dropped out at Michigan Bluff myself at Western States, and it was one of the toughest, most painful moments in my career, but also a moment where the alternative didn't feel like an option. Yeah. Any reflections about that moment where they cut your wristband?
I thought I was going to be really, really upset when they cut my wristband, but because I had been contemplating the two answers for the last hour, I sat there for an hour before they cut it.
So did I.
It felt a little better because in my mind, the only other option was to walk sort of to the finish.
45 miles for the listener.
Yeah. And walk is a gracious term. It's like limp walk your way 45 miles. And I guess I just knew that there's more to running than one race, like finishing one race. And if I were to go walk on that ankle for 45 miles, an ankle that I'd never felt that kind of pain before, like I knew that would become even worse. And then I was like, well, what would that do to my running career? And so, looking back, the decision wasn't 100% easy, but because I couldn't run at all, it made it a little bit easier to be like, I'm not going to walk limp this thing in, even though, that thought hadn't even crossed my mind an hour earlier. The thought of not finishing wasn't even close to being at the forefront of my consciousness. I was like, this is going great. I'm just running. Like, this is just, we're going aid station to aid station. Didn't even think of finishing, didn't think of not finishing, but by no means did I think of like pulling the plug at 50, right? Or 55. So I think just the shock of that being an option all of a sudden was just like so overbearing. I think that's why it was so emotional, because you go from having all these things under your control, all of these plans and backup plans and backup plans. And then you have this thing happen that's like not even close to your list. You're like, wait, how is this like what's happening today? This is what's happening. I can't even go.
I mean, I was heartbroken for you myself after running the perfect first half and catching up to the lead. We were like, oh no, Keely's got ahead of steam. So, I mean, it's easy to say, oh, it's just one race, but it's Western States. And I think you said earlier that you'd never been more locked in or dialed in on a particular goal in your athletic career, which is kind of a big statement. Were there any moments of panic or self-doubt about going all in as an athlete at this point? Because when you leave the security of your corporate job and go to what was certainly the highlight of your race calendar in 2022 and have it end in complete disaster, it feels like that might be a moment of second guessing yourself. Did you experience that?
I mean, for sure. I think, after the race, especially not once I found out what actually happened, you're diagnosed with a bunch of torn tendons, some bone issues. All of a sudden you're in a boot for 2 months. And the goal is to not get surgery, or basically your career is over. I'm like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Like, maybe this is just the writing on the wall, is like, maybe I'm not good enough. And maybe I'm also not resilient enough. My body can't handle this sport. I've had that happen before. My high school basketball career, I was going to play in college, and that got destroyed by 2 shoulder surgeries that I needed. So it's like, this is not an unfamiliar thing to me, being like limited by your own body. And so having that happen again in such a like uncontrollable way felt very familiar and not comfortable, right? Because you're like, cool, I could put in all of this time and do every single thing right, but there's still like an element of lack of control of my own body, which is really unarming, right? Because you want to be able to control yourself. So,
semi-profound question here. Eventually you do the rehab, you're in a boot for 2 months, and we're skipping ahead. You're now back at the top of your game. Seems like feeling very fit. We'll talk about that in a sec, but back to the more deep contemplative question here. Is there any specific thing that you learned about yourself during this particular injury process that is crystallized that you may otherwise not have an understanding of if you would have had the race of your dreams at Western States?
Oh, 100%. I'm sorry to every single person who came up to me at Western States and was like, it's okay, you're going to learn from this. Because I basically just looked at them like, I already learned enough. But no, they were spot on. You learn something every time. But I would say that this injury and a lot of experiences thereafter have re-solidified my need to listen to myself at the very, very deepest core. So, a lot of reflection has gone into this. Going into Western States, I definitely felt like I was running within myself, but there was a tiny little thought I had at the top when I was running in that little more technical section that I wanted to tie my shoes, but I didn't. And I twisted it the first time. And then there was a little tiny thought that said, I think you should tie your shoes at the next aid station. And I didn't. And I continued on. And who knows if that would have changed anything? That's not really the point. Since then, I've also had times where I've gone out, maybe it's on a run and it's a double that it's not 100% needed. And I'm like, oh, I should do it. And I'm like, but it's dark and maybe I'll like twist my ankle or something. And then you do. It's like, we have a lot of thoughts inside that we like to shut them up because we think they're weak or we think they're inconvenient. And it's actually a lot of them, I think, have a lot of solid ground and we choose to ignore them. And so I've really just started to try to let myself listen to them, even though the ego in me doesn't want to listen to them.
Yep. It's tuning into our intuition. This was my biggest thing from 2022 that also arrived in therapy and something that I now focus on a lot, especially with the stuff that we do with Freetrail, because there's so many things where it's like, you have to decide, you have to make decisions, right? And sometimes it feels like a coin flip, but it's really, that's your opportunity to tune into that deeper instinct and intuition. So
we know ourselves pretty well. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So where are you right now with your running? You don't need to give us the whole story of your rehab. Where are you now?
Yeah, I think I'll just give a little story of where I am in context to the most recent run I did at Joshua Tree. I think it will tie the story full circle. So I decided to do the Joshua Tree FKT Traverse. It's a 38-mile point-to-point across the park. You have the men's FKT. Sure. Claire Gallagher had the women's FKT. And I decided to go do it kind of last minute. Rachel Drake, my good friend, had recommended it because I was going to Southern California for vacation. And, leading up to it, I was hanging out with a bunch of friends, none of which are runners. We're staying out late. I don't have my normal breakfast, don't have any sort of normal routine. Last minute, the day before, I decided to go do it. I had been battling a little bit of a cough. But going into the run, I talked to my partner and he's just like, you just do it for yourself. Like, remember why you do it, like at your core, and just run for that. And I hadn't thought of running in that way for a really long time, but I think by thinking of it that way, it makes you listen to that little voice a little bit better. And so, the morning of the race or the run, we go to the start and my crew is supposed to be at mile 20 and mile 30. And a pacer's supposed to be there at mile 20, and I get to mile 20, and I'd been running so true to myself on all of the technical downhills. I just slowed down. I didn't try to push it at all. I was like, you know what? This is what feels comfortable to me with my ankle. I don't care if it's too slow. I'm going to do it because it's like so true to me. I get to the aid station. My crew isn't there. My pacer's there with like a little teeny handheld of water. I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to 30, like gonna see if they're there. But again, I didn't let myself think of like anything negative. I was just thinking like, I'm still in this beautiful place. We still have some water. Like, I'm okay. And I'm still really enjoying this. I just need to slow my pace a little bit because I don't know how much water we have or how long that will get me there and what will be at 30. And getting to 30, crew still wasn't there. Running around a little bit looking for my crew. I still didn't feel panicky, which is just like so cool to think about because I was still just feeling really in tune with myself. Thinking like, okay, well, I might just have to stop here because I don't have any water. And it's been 10 more miles plus these last 8 that I haven't had water.
In the middle of the most arid place.
Exactly, in the desert. But I stood there for a while, tried to call my crew. Finally, this woman walks by and I'm just like, hey, do you happen to know if like there's any water? And she's like, oh, there's this jug that they use for thru hikers. Like, let me fill one of your flasks. And so she filled my flask full. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just keep going. I'll pull back the pace a little bit just to get to the finish so that I don't like bonk on the way there. I had been siphoning some calories in the like rare instance that this happened. I still at least had one little package of goo chews. And I just got to the finish and I didn't have a low moment. I didn't have any crazy high moments. I just felt really in tune with myself and loved the whole experience because that run is also really, really beautiful. So it was really fun. It was a really cool, like full circle experience to be like, wow, I didn't have anything that went to plan. I didn't control anything, but all I did was like, think about what I was thinking internally and like controlled my own mind. And that was pretty cool.
And sometimes the joy of just returning back to running maybe takes away some of those competitive pressures that you put on yourself and allows you to enjoy the process of just running the Joshua Tree Traverse independent of a record. So good learning.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I'm glad to hear you're sort of back on your game after a tough second half of 2022. I recall seeing you on the Altra G a bunch of times to go lift weights in Portland, and now you're shredding the desert to pieces.
Yep. I know.
Speaking of shredding the desert to pieces, I know you're getting ready for the Black Canyon 100K. You mentioned that at the beginning. You're coached by our mutual friend, Tyler Green, Portland's finest. Can you reveal sort of what you guys have been working on in this lead up? I saw your most recent Instagram. You said you did about 95 miles in training last week, which feels like big volume, and probably you're sort of in the heart of the biggest weeks right now. Can you give us a glimpse into what you guys are working on?
Yeah. So we kind of spearheaded everything with that Joshua Tree Traverse because it's net downhill, similar to Black Canyon's, how Black Canyon starts. And then we've just been focusing on really long, hard, mixed, like basically long, hard efforts. And so he'll throw some workouts on my calendar that are like 18, 19 miles, but it's really just, it's like staying focused for that long. In like that tempo zone, on rolling terrain, on downhill terrain, and just getting comfortable, like staying focused for that long and pushing yourself for these longer distances. And then we've also been really emphasizing running downhill strong just to get that quad strength for Black Canyons because it is net downhill. Not that that's been going super well because the trails in Portland are not great for downhill right now. It's basically downhill skiing because they're so muddy. But, I've been running a lot of vertical. So I think I'm still getting enough on my legs. We've definitely been building volume since the injury, and I won't be at 95 miles every single week, but these last 2 weeks, this week and the last week, were both around there. And it feels really good. It's definitely a lot. It reminds me that it's a lot of miles and you got to like up your caloric intake and get more sleep and all that stuff. But it also feels really cool to be back running that. And I feel pretty confident for Black Canyon. But I'm also really stoked to just be back out there and like run with some stellar women again and keep the pressure low and just have fun and like remember like why we do this.
Yeah. I'd love to go deeper on what you just said about staying focused. Is that a prompt that Tyler gives you in your training and to like stay focused for this workout? Because if I think about him, I think one of his strengths is his ability to stay focused. Is that something you guys actively talk about?
Yeah, he definitely brings up different mantras for a lot of my training blocks. And so some of it is like just getting the float on the trails. And that's like the theme for a while. And it's just like feeling more like in unison with the trail and getting used to just like floating. So whether that's your intervals or your tempo or hill workout, it's like still just like work with the trail, like flow with the trail. A lot of that was used during Western States build because he wanted me to like roll with the downhills, kind of like the marble, to like not let the downhills beat you up. It's like roll with them. Yeah. And so for Black Canyon, it's like, I think it's a lot of focus on trail because it's like easy to let up focus. And then maybe you do twist an ankle or maybe you just like start running a speed that's not yours. And so this feels a lot more internal of like, stay focused, stay present in the moment of like, this is your interval that you're on. And then like, this is the next one. And it's like such a long, diverse workout that like, you have to stay present the entire time.
Very interesting. And I think a perfect, illustration of Tyler, the person too, and like giving you those mantras in addition to prescribing the training to add that emotional or psychological element to it also beyond just the physical X's and O's of the workout and the specifications of the intensities that you should be targeting. So shout out Tyler Green. We actually were sending each other selfies walking with our sons strapped to our chest the other day. So, my assumption is that you're going back to Black Canyon to punch a golden ticket to Western States to avenge that disappointment. Is that accurate? Is that the express purpose of the trip to Arizona?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that the A goal or the A purpose would be to leave with a golden ticket. The B purpose would be to run like the race I know I'm capable of, whether that's a golden ticket or not. Right. So it's like, you can't control who comes to the race, who shows up that day and all that. But I'd say, in an ideal world, I leave with a ticket, but also in a semi-ideal world, I just leave being really stoked with where I'm at and stoked with my race.
Yeah. Fantastic. So as we wind down, Keely, I'd love to talk about Trail Society a little bit with you, just to kind of get a little bit more of the behind the scenes for your fans out there. You guys are like a year and a half into it at this point, which is kind of crazy to think. That time has flown by, and Trail Society was your idea, more or less. We should state, equivocally here on the front end. I'd love to hear you talk about just like what value that project has brought into your life and to your career as an athlete, and maybe what your goals are for it going forward.
Great question. I think, first of all, you gave me the confidence to create this thought and to build the team of Trail Society. So kudos might go to you. But I would say, some of the biggest things that I have gotten from Trail Society that I don't think I ever thought I would, are around community. I think the community we have built through Trail Society is really, really special. And I run into someone, almost weekly who feels the need to introduce themselves and to comment on the podcast, which just feels really special. I don't think people know how far their words go, because sometimes it can feel very insular, recording these podcasts. You have no clue who listens. Like, you're like, I really hope that people like what we're putting out there, but to actually hear it from the community and to have people reaching out about ideas and about all sorts of stuff is like really cool. And then I think the second thing is just learning from every avenue of it, whether it's learning about new people who we bring on to interview, so people in different communities than our own, or just learning from the other co-hosts. Like, we're all different people. We all bring different strengths to the table. And so I think we've also just learned a lot from each other and learned a lot about like teamwork and how to actually, progress a brand together.
Yeah. Any projects in the pipeline that you want to tease for the audience here? Things that you're working on or excited about with the show specifically in 2023?
Yeah. I think we have just some phenomenal interviewees lined up for the foreseeable next couple of months. And then a really cool episode we're going to have again in the next couple of months. So February, March are going to be pretty sweet. Is going to be with myself and Dr. Pritchett, and we're actually going to leak out our latest study results after we get them accepted by a journal. So that'll be a really cool episode too. And that's like directly implicated to trail runners and fueling and all sorts of stuff. So that'll be a cool one too.
And Dr. Kelly Pritchett is one part of the Freetrail crew now, Freetrail Experts, bringing the conversation full circle.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, I can't wait to tune in as usual. And thanks for what you do for Freetrail, Keely. Thanks for all your work on this Freetrail Experts project. Thanks for what you do for the broader trail running community. And thanks for coming back on the pod.
Yeah, thanks for what you do to the community too. Thanks so much.